Akhenaten, Amarna Art by Eliza Tan, Phoebe Torres, and Nikki Flores.
Who is Akhenaten? He is the son of Amenhotep III, who was the ninth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Akhenaten reigned in the year 1353 to 36 BCE. He was known before as Amenhotep IV, but changed his name due to his religious influences. Akhenaten influenced Egypt with his strong religious beliefs.
This sun god, he created one of the earliest monotheistic religions, which is Atenism. He then made himself known to be Akhenaten, his name meaning beneficial to Aten, which was the sun disk and mainly a feature of the Egyptian sun god Ra. It refers to the sun, but most importantly, Akhenaten manifests himself as a physical representation of Aten. Wherever Akhenaten is portrayed, Aten is always with him. Atenism is about a religion that focuses on worshipping the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. He forbade anyone to worship any other god or religion other than Atenism, as it was established in 1346 BC.
Changes in art style. Inspired by the Aten, Akhenaten changed Egypt's art style drastically. Before Aten's reign, the pharaoh was usually depicted in artworks as very stern, rigid, and stiff, portraying them as competent and strong leaders. However, when Akhenaten took over, the depictions of the pharaoh became very exaggerated. Some call it naturalistic. Either way, it makes the pharaoh look rather weak. Pictures of Akhenaten and his family were full of motion, contrasting to the art before his rule.
Appearance of the pharaoh. Akhenaten's body was both feminine and masculine. He had a slim figure, wide hips, an elongated skull, and a wide belly. The pictures of him and his family shows him to be a good father and husband, playing with his kids and holding hands with his wife Nefertiti. Before his rule, Egyptian art barely had any facial expressions, and they sat in straight, firm positions with their fists clenched. Akhenaten changed this so that bodily proportions were unnatural and facial expressions were dramatized. Long jaws, big eyes, and jutting lips. Historians suggest that these exaggerated features were caused by a disease that Akhenaten could have possibly had. Marfan syndrome, for example, is a disease which affects connective tissue, causing elongation of body parts, such as arms, fingers, toes, and facial parts. The Amarna style in sculptures and carvings. The human body depicted in the Amarna style was usually very exaggerated, elongated skulls, hanging jaws, thin legs, etc. Theories suggest that these features were influenced by Akhenaten's physical deformities, possibly from disease. The type of art depicted in the Amarna style ranged from noble beauty to distorted human bodies.
However, this also might have simply been an art style that was based on Pharaoh's liking. During the Amarna period, there were two known official sculptures. Bek was the first sculptor of the pharaoh, and then Thutmose during the later part of the reign, who is known for creating. The bust of Nefertiti was such realistic feel to it, but also did artworks like the garden, which was in the same disfigured yet exaggerated style. The royal family. His father was Amenhotep III, who was the ninth pharaoh amongst the generations of the 18th dynasty. His mother was Queen Tayi, royal wife of Amenhotep III. Fun fact, her mummy is known as the Elder Lady that was found in the year 1898 tomb of Amenhotep II. Akhenaten's own wife was Nefertiti, who was also known as the Great Royal Wife. He also had a second spouse named Kaya, as there were theories that led to the mother of Tutankhamun and Smenkhare. He had many sisters. They were Sitamun, Hinatuneb, Iset or Isis, Nebete, and was mentioned that Beketaten was a possible sibling. He had an older brother named Thutmose. Then comes his children, which he had six daughters who were named Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpaaten, Neferneferuaten, Nasherit, Neferneferue, and Setenpenre. His sons' names were Tutankhamun and Smenkhare, his son-in-law. Later on, his son-in-law Smenkhare married his half-sister. In the Egyptian pharaoh family tree, it is often found that they would marry their own sibling and create a family. Overall, the royal family had a long-lasting yet confusing family bloodline. The scale at which his family, mostly his wife Nefertiti, is known, as seen on the left traditionally, the family of the pharaoh don't tend to appear, and if they do, they are downsized to a much smaller scale, miniature, compared to the pharaoh. However, during Akhenaten's rule, there were many depictions of him and his family. Notice the size of his wife compared to the image on the left. She is almost the same size as her husband, Nefertiti, also equal as a co-ruler. Reliefs blatantly showed Akhenaten with his wife being intimate, which was unheard of in Egypt. On the left, we see that Nefertiti is colored with the same red ochre skin tone that was typically reserved for males.
Private tombs. The private tombs of the post-Amarna period are characterized by an emphasis on scenes from daily life, such as agriculture, food production, and crafts. The walls of the private tombs also depicted the deceased relations with the gods, the awards and titles they held, the final judgment proving that they were innocent, as well as the family of the deceased. During Akhenaten's rule, this was replaced by depictions of the deceased adoring the Aten, and the hymn to the Aten is generally present with it. The sun rays of Aten do not shine over the deceased but to Akhenaten. This shows how he is the direct and only connection to the Aten. In general, a wall is occupied to its full height by one large scene centered on a representation of the king and the royal family instead of the deceased.
The Amarna style in architecture. The Amarna style is the style of Egyptian art created by Akhenaten. He was inspired by the sun god Aten. The Amarna style that Akhenaten introduced is seen in architecture such as the Aten temples and in his monuments, both in Karnak, Egypt, and Tel El Amarna, what used to be the city of Akhenaten. The temples and sanctuaries were open to the sun, open for the public to see, which was unlike the traditional design of temples, which were more closed and private-looking.
Reliefs/artworks in the temples and castle. Temple decorations of the Amarna period reflects and focuses more on the glorious world created and governed by the all-powerful sun, which is why there are more everyday life scenes portrayed instead of the traditional military conquest or ritual scenes involving gods. Amarna art also shows colorful and realistic decorative depictions of nature in their palace walls and floors, which is unlike the fluid/exaggerated style in which the people were being portrayed. Fun fact: most of the images or depictions of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were hacked out/destroyed because the ancient Egyptian people were not fond of the changes he made, which is why they changed back to the traditional ways soon after his death and tried to erase/forget his existence and rule.